Hi, and thanks everyone for joining us. My name's Lauren Holden Kilbane, and I'm a member of the Board of Advisors for Yale School of Management's new Experienced Leaders Initiative, which we're going to be talking about today. I'm joined by Bonnie Wan and Marc Freedman, who are two people who bring really amazing experience to not just this conversation, but this whole space. Marc is a Yale alum and the program director for the Experienced Leaders Initiative. And Bonnie Wan is a partner at Goodby Silverstein and partner and head of brand strategy. Also the author of the Life Brief and a board advisor for ELI. So thanks both for being here. I'm excited to get into conversation with the two of you.
Thanks for having us, Lauren.
Likewise.
My favorite thing was in preparation for this, the three of us arguing who got to be the facilitator. So we all agreed there's no facilitation, just conversation. And but before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. Kristen Storick West and Joanne Legler are in the chat. They're both from Yale, and we'd like to keep this as interactive as we can as we go. It's hard when there's almost 300 of you signed up for this, so I don't know how many people we actually have, but if you want to say hello and let us know where you're from, go ahead and do that. So to the extent that we can make it interactive, we will. If not, there will be Q&A at the end. Our goal today really is to get specific and concrete about what this program is and how it might help you and all of us in this time. And just a little bit of context. I'm here because earlier in this year, Yale invited me to think a little bit about this space and talk to people who were either approaching transition or deep in it. And they were in the throes of final design and really wanted to get it right, not just in terms of offer, but the way that they were talking about it and making sure that they were connecting with people in a most, true and authentic way. So I had a chance to talk to lawyers, people in pharma, people in foundations, nonprofits, startups. And it was so interesting to me because so many people who, despite every measure of having had a successful career and being in a space where they had financial security, health, time, wisdom, all of it, still felt challenged by two simple questions. And the first one was, what have you been up to? And the second was, what do you have planned next? And Marc, I mean, you are the master in this space. You know so much. You've been activating people in this way. Can you give us a little bit of cultural context and then also how ELI has been designed to meet people in this moment?
Sure. Well, thanks, Lauren. And it's such a joy to be in conversation with you and Bonnie. Maybe I'll just start with the question of longevity. We've added 30 years to the human lifespan since the beginning of the last century, which, according to demographers, is more than we added in all of the previous millennia. So this is a very dramatic change where people have a much longer length of life, and that continues to go up. At the same time, what we're seeing, and I think is less well appreciated, is a new map of life. It used to be that we had childhood, adulthood, and old age and retirement. But I think what's happening now is we're seeing the emergence of an entirely new period of life between the middle years and anything resembling old age or traditional retirement, which for many people will be as long as midlife in duration, but it's a period that's very poorly marked. We don't have a name for it. Some people are talking about middlescence, the third, the next chapter. But just as important is that we don't have pathways into this period. And so for so many people, it's a do-it-yourself process, which is confusing, anxiety-provoking, expensive. But fortunately, over the last decade, we've seen the emergence of a whole new kind of education for people who are trying to figure out who they're going to be in the next phase, what they're going to do, and who are really determined to have a period of deep fulfillment. And that's where this program comes in. I keep thinking of a wonderful line from Joseph Campbell, the expert on this. He said, midlife is when you get to the top of the ladder and discover it's leaning against the wrong wall. And I think this program, the Eli program, is an attempt to help people get their ladders from one wall to the right one.
Yeah. I mean, you know, what's interesting too, you talked about you can put in the work. It's a hard thing to do alone. I mean, I think one of the people that I spoke with, he had been, his self-study was amazing. And I'm looking at all the books on your shelf back there, Marc, and I'm sure he read most of them and taken all sorts of notes. But he really got to a point where he said, you know, this isn't, I can't, it's, yes, it's the first step. I can do this on my own, but I can't do it all on my own. And I think even the most accomplished people, they hit a wall at a certain point, and they do need cohort and community in this time.
Yeah, well, think
It's such
about
a
young
part of-
people. Oh, I'm sorry, Bonnie.
No, it's just such a part of the human experience, right? To be stretched and inspired and guided by the experience of others, even though it is up to us, I think, in this beautiful yet terrifying moment in time where ambiguity is all around us and within us, because the traditional roads have eroded or evaporated. That can be really scary. And we don't have to face some of the fears that come up in that alone, because when we can be in community, then it opens up the opportunity to get creative about what is possible. And I think that's really the magic of ELI, is bringing together a community of people with wisdom, experience, passion, ideas, and putting them in a container together with amazing resources, and design in a really accessible way, which I know, Marc, you're going to talk about the hybrid design of this program, so that more people from diverse backgrounds can come into this container. But this longevity question has been so interesting for me. We know people are living longer, but I think the palpable question that I'm hearing all around, and not just from people in this second act or third stage of life, but people at all ages and stages, is, but how do we live better? We might be living longer, but how do we live better? And the answers to that question is as individual as every one of us. And that's so full of possibility, yet so daunting at the same time. We are our own compasses in a world that, you know, there's no more roadmaps, playbooks, shared blueprints, right, for what's next. Because now we have portfolio careers. We're not just living in 3 acts, we're living in 7 to 8 year chapters. What's the definition and spine of each of those chapters? We have side hustles and main entrees. We have micro entrepreneurship. We have a gig economy. We have AI. And a lot of those things can be terrifying, yet also exciting. But I think the key is what you both mentioned before is, are you alone in it? Or can you feed off of the energy and community and the generosity of others who are navigating this together?
Yeah, you know, that's, I think one of the things in your book that you talk about, Bonnie, is really that, and the importance of a brief, obviously, but the importance of framework and problem statements. And Marc, you know, with Co-Generate, you gave people a place to land. I mean, and you're bringing that forward too. Can you both talk a little bit about the importance of framework and structure, and you know, whether or not it's scientifically proven, but it's, you know, this is not a random pursuit. This is something that's been studied and is being brought into the ELI, programming.
Yeah, well, I think it's so important that people see this chapter as one that has its own significance and integrity. You know, for a long time we'd hear things about people in their 50s, 60s, 70s being the working retired. There were all these contradictions, the young old, have one foot in one space and another in the other space. And I feel like that's all wrong, that what we're seeing is the emergence of a period that has unique possibilities, and we're seeing a population explosion of people flooding into that period, you know, to what Bonnie was saying, you know, who are really pioneers who are shaping what this period is going to be, not only for themselves, but for generations to come, because this growth and longevity is not a short-term blip. It's an enduring trend. And I go back, it turns out that there was the person who founded psychology in America and the person who invented adolescence was a psychologist named G. Stanley Hall. He's the person who brought Freud and Jung to America. And in his 80s, he said, I should have never invented adolescence. I should have invented this new stage of life between midlife and old age. And he was a poet at heart, and he described it as an Indian summer. And he said human beings didn't reach the height of their capacity until the shadows started slanting eastward. And I think what he was talking about, and then, you know, there were so few people who are actually living to that period, is a population that has the benefit of experience and the time to do something with it. And that's really never happened in such a massive way as we're seeing now. And I think the challenge to society is how to realize that possibility rather than writing people off at the top of their game, to help people retool in ways that fit the spiritual, psychological, vocational imperatives of this time.
I think too, it really does require deciding you're going to do it and carving out the time, because I think any one of us and anyone on this call, I'm already seeing the way that people are thinking about it, and there's so many nice contributions here. But just making the time to get this done and to invest in yourself is so important. One of the things when we were last together that we were talking about was just that power of connection, and what that's going to look like in a hybrid format. I know there's a lot of great programs out there, some that, you know, you move for a year and you're deeply immersed in it, and others that are weekends and others that are week-long things. Can you talk a little bit about the format of hybrid and how connection will really work here?
Sure. Bonnie, do you want me to jump in and start on that?
Sure. I just want to jump in and say what attracted me to the advisory group, besides you, Lauren, and you, Marc, was the design of this, you know, this kind of sandwich design that helps people get to know each other full body, not just neck up, you know, and imprint on each other, like hear each other's stories, their context, really deepen that connection before they continue it in a really virtual way, where they can go at their own pace and in their own spaces, but then to come back together. And I think really designing it around how human beings love to inspire, connect, and bring each other ideas and clarity.
Yeah, that really echoes my draw to this program as well. And I've been involved for the last actually 15 years in this movement of OnCore education programs that started with the Harvard Advanced Leadership Initiative, and then spread to Stanford and the University of Chicago and Notre Dame, and now Oxford and Texas and many other places. And it's really a remarkable movement, and people who are going to those programs are getting an enormous amount out of it. But there are not opportunities for people who aren't in the position to pay the tuition of those programs, who aren't able to relocate to another part of the country. And so when we thought about the ELI program, the Experienced Leaders Initiative, we wanted to try to provide alternatives for people who wanted to have a new chapter in their education, but weren't in a position to go to the existing options. And so that started with a blend between in-person and virtual learning. And so the new program will start with a period on the Yale campus, and it'll end with a period on the Yale campus. But in between, there'll be virtual sessions so you can stay in your home community. There's a second hybrid that we're developing in this program, and that for me is also extremely exciting, which is the blend between exploration and experiential learning. You know, for young people these days, there's a new kind of education at places like Northeastern and Drexel. It's called co-op. It's kind of a work study where you have a chance to think about where you want to go, and then roll up your sleeves and try them on. And so we'll be building in experiential dimensions, which is really designed to help people make the transition from the program to their next chapter, whatever that may reside. So I think of us as a kind of, you know, we hear about a double helix. This is like a double hybrid. It's also to go to your point, Lauren, it's built around the idea of connection. You know, so many of us, as we leave our midlife careers, feel not just a void in terms of purpose, but also connection. So many of our friends revolved around work. And so in multiple ways, we'll be building connection, obviously in the time when people are physically together on campus, but through working on joint projects where there's a kind of productive friendship that's developed. And then also through a joint exploration, we'll be having a memoir writing component to the program led by one of the Yale faculty, Stephanie Dunson. And people will be exploring, interrogating, reviewing their lives and sharing that with each other. So the connection will happen in ways that are both intellectual, vocational, but also in a deeper sense as well.
Yeah, you know, what I love about what you're describing, Marc, is, and I've been calling this an incubation approach or an incubator approach to education, where you're really intersecting aspiration and ambition with action, with the practical action and application. I think so many of what I know of traditional old school education is that it's very, you know, one direction, and we're not really getting our hands dirty, playing out, bringing out experimentation and play into our ideas. So this is so, it's so wonderful. And I think we'd be remiss not to talk about the inward, outward, forward framework and how the course has been designed over the 6 months. Inward meaning clarity, which is my favorite thing as a strategist. You know, how do we get clear about the essence of who you are and what you want this next chapter to be? So that inward phase is really about making you the compass, because in this peak ambiguity time, we are our own best compass, but we can get to it together. And then outward, being stretched to so many diverse sets of experiences, wisdoms, and intergenerational, which was another magical part of this, is not just being with like-minded, like experienced people, but really being stretched from all different industries, from nonprofits to social entrepreneurship to pro athletes. Joanna, shout to you. Nike execs. I just think that the mix of the cohort is so energizing. And then you, of course, you have the Yale faculty, and then forward being the momentum. The hardest part is to start, and how do we bridge ideas to action? How do we create the scaffolding for you to start before the program ends and really test and learn? I think And then the connections we talked about is so essential for beyond the program, post-program scaffolding. So I'm thrilled by how thoughtful the entire design has been.
Yeah.
Well, so much
I
of
have
it.
to, oh, go
Yeah,
ahead,
no,
Marc.
I was going to turn to you, Lauren. So much of it builds on the research that you did leading into the program, and I was hoping you would share some of those insights.
Well, one of the things is I have to say about this connective tissue, the connection thing is I brought a little healthy dose of Gen X skepticism to this. Like, really, I'm gonna just like get a week on either end of this, and like then I have to be on my own. And I have to say my experience as part of the advisory and even working with Yale as a researcher on the upfront, the connection, I mean, Yale knows how to do this, and they create the conditions for connection to happen. And just even the way that our own cohort as an advisory was curated, I can only imagine what that will be like for this inaugural cohort for ELI. So I'm a converted Gen Xer on the connection point, just virtually, because so many of us, oh, to your point, Bonnie, we actually only know one another from, here up. And I can only imagine what will happen when we get together and in person. It already feels lifelong, and it hasn't been that long. But I mean, I think, Marc, you were asking about the work. One of the things that that made me laugh, one of the people that I spoke with said, "Hey, could you just do me a favor? Could you rebrand this retirement thing? It just makes me feel like I'm decommissioned, and I do feel like I was just thinking about all the people that I spoke to. And at the end of any sort of insight exploratory, there are always a few sound bites that stick and kind of inform the work forward. And for me, there were two things. And they were both people who had recently left, again, their capital C careers and had all sorts of possibility in front of them. And were optimistic about it. The first is a quote from a guy called John that I interviewed, who said, "It seems to me a third of your life is worth some consideration." And I really liked that. It was just so reasonable and true. And a reminder, it's a third of your life that's left, and you can do whatever you want with it. No pressure, but like, yeah, take the time to consider that. And I really liked that as something that informed the final design of ELI. And then the other is a friend of mine who I interviewed as part of this, Libby Delana. Her mantra, and now mine, and I share this with anybody that I can, is what's the best that can happen? And really to come into it that way, as opposed to, oh gosh, what am I going to do now? It's like, what's the best that could happen? I've had a great career. I have nothing left to prove. I've got time, I've got money, I've got health, I've got wisdom. Let's go. And I think the way Libby frames it up is, I've got 15 summers left, 20 if I'm lucky. Let's do this, and I really like that attitude and that optimism and the focus on possibility and richness here. I think another quote that was kind of funny that stuck with me too was, somebody had said, yoga and pickleball, yeah, but that's just not enough for me. I want to do a little bit more. And nobody felt like they needed to save the world, but they did want to move forward with purpose, and so I think that's what's kind of nice about this framework and structure and the resources available at Yale. I mean, I thinking about pulling in from the School of Management, the School of Divinity, this memoir writing, the kind of exploration, like anybody who has a curious mind and some ambition, like this 6 months they're going to be very powerful. And they might not provide all the answers, but I feel like the navigation will get a little bit tighter. Because I mean, that abundance of possibility, it's great and overwhelming.
I love your use of the word abundance, because I think that in some ways should hang over the Eli program as a kind of directional mantra, and it really fits with what you were saying before about the 30 years. You know, if you're going to have a chapter that could be at least 10, 20, 30 years, shouldn't you spend some time planning out and thinking about it? The parent of an 18-year-old who just went off to college. That child will probably get 4 years of college, maybe 2, 3, 4 years of graduate school to go from being an adolescent to an emerging adult. What about all the folks who've been toiling for decades as parents, as workers, as community members? Don't we also need some time to step back and think about how our priorities have shifted? That's the inward part of the program that Bonnie was talking about, to try to understand where our priorities meet the needs of the world. That's the essence of purpose, that intersection of those two things. And then to think about how we get from here to there, from what's last to what's next, the transition component. And I think that that's something that we have not built into this longer life course. And it's something that we'll be trying to do at Yale, and in service of something, you know, again, to go back to what you were saying, Lauren, that's different from retirement. You know, that word retirement, it comes from a French word that means to go off into seclusion. And that's not where we think the Eli Fellows will be headed at the end of this program. And we're helping them to go off and to do, in many cases, some of their most important work.
There's some great language to replace retire in the chat, you know, from rewire to rethrive or rethrivement. And I know Joanna Lohman on our board has talked about, this is a refiring of our senses. It's not a putting away. It's not parking, you know, compartmentalizing. It's refiring, reframing, and reauthoring what is possible. I'm here in Sonoma right now at a retreat with about 25 women who are thinking about this stuff. And there's a lot of grief going on, you know, there's a lot of question about who am I when I am separated from my career and identity, that big C you talked about, Lauren. But there's a lot of excitement for how to answer that. Who am I? Now that I am in this new space and I get to reorient my time and attention and apply my purpose and open up the field of possibility and look into it with curiosity and creativity with people, other people doing the same. And I think that's this is a moment collectively that we're all going.
Oh, sorry, Ronnie.
No,
There are two things in the chat that I really want to pull out right now. The first is Sally Kingston shares, the word for retirement in Spanish is, oh my gosh, I speak French, but not Spanish, but so jubilation, I'll say it with a French accent.
That's very
good. Wonderful. I mean, this is what we're talking about. This is the optimism of this moment. I love that. And thank you, Sally, so much for sharing that and the reframing. But also Connie shares, this is a rekindling of self that we may have left behind in pursuit of the practical. And I think the last conversation that three of us had in preparation, and with Kristen as well, the four of us, had in preparation for this, Bonnie, you talked a lot about that time of for the responsible ones. The people you've done the responsibility thing, you've been the responsible one, you know, did all the things, and now it's time to invest in yourself. And so, Connie, thank you for sharing that, because that that reminded me of a rich moment we shared before that I'd love to bring forward now.
Well, David Brooks talks about in his book, and I believe David is a Yale professor or grad, or has been through the halls of Yale. He talks about a second mountain, which is, you're talking about, Lauren, the first mountain is that path that we've been handed or we've inherited from
Mhm.
our families, from society, people with really good intentions and love for us. But this pathway of, you know, study the right thing, get the right degree, the right job, the right partner. And then we look around, and many of us have scaled that first mountain. But then we still feel at the peak as we're looking out into the view that there's still this restless hum. This is like the ladder analogy that you brought in at the beginning, Marc. Wait, why am I still feeling this? But the second mountain is one that we get to pioneer and trailblaze for ourselves and take off the suit of responsibility. Annie asked about the differences between men and women. And I think that's a really good one for us to explore. The women I have worked with most recently, especially since the launch of my book, there's an extra layer and dose of that responsibility armor that they need to keep serving the people around them, whether it's as leaders for the industries that they have led or in their families, or a lot of them in a sandwich situation right now where they're caregiving still children and parents and, aging adults or loved ones. And so that responsibility armor is particularly heavy for the women I meet.
Marc, you've worked with both men and women in this, and maybe what do you think? Is there a different experience for the men? And what is the power of a multi-gender cohort?
Yes, well, I think women have been leading the way in rethinking this period of life. In fact, the very first kind of treatment of this period was Betty Friedan's The Fountain of Age. So, and I don't think that was an accident. I think women have been more accustomed to transitions throughout life as well, including re-entering the workforce in many cases. But I wanted to go back to a few things that you were saying, Bonnie. One was you invoked David Brooks's Second Mountain book, which I reviewed for the Washington Post. I can't remember what I said about it, but one of the things that I remembered in reading that is that Brooks has this beautiful counterposing of resume virtues and eulogy virtues. And I think that that's something that there's a soulfulness to this period. People don't want to necessarily be, have somebody read their LinkedIn profile at the memorial service, but it's, if you go to, and Brooks argues this, if you go to people's memorials, you hear the things that really matter in life. And that's what is going to be a very important feature of this program. It's as we were saying, it's not just what you're going to do next, but who you're going to be and the possibilities there. I wanted to also go to something Lauren was saying about attitudes. We and attitudes towards age and the attitudes we have towards ourselves as we age. We'll be beginning the on-campus portion of the Eli program with a Yale professor of public health, Becca Levy, who's written a book called Breaking the Age Code that builds on decades of her research, which shows that older people who have negative attitudes towards aging live 7.5 years fewer than people who have positive attitudes. So investing in a sense of possibility, in an optimistic view of the future, actually is closely related to living that future. So that's a really important thing. And I think we're going to be starting the program off in ways which are designed to help nurture a growth mindset. We just completed one of the first interviews for Eli with a friend of Bonnie's and mine, Scott Shigioka, who's just written a book about curiosity called Seek. And Scott's going to be talking about how you develop the muscle of curiosity. we tend to associate curiosity with children, but curiosity is essential in this stage of life. And that's really where we'll be beginning the program, and then thinking about how you can nurture the three traits which we think are so important in this period of life. One is purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. The second is connection, love, and the third is generativity. This idea of purpose and love that flows up and down the generational chain. The Harvard study of adult development finds that older people over 50 who connect and collaborate with younger generations are 3 times as likely to be happy as those who fail to do so. And Freud said the keys to life are love and work. So we're going to have love and work that connects with younger generations as important features of the first phase of the program.
Mm-hmm. And that, Marc, that was one question I had. I know, we framed up our conversation today as inward, outward, forward, thinking about next. I know that's not a siloed organization. It's more of a fluid experience for the Experienced Leaders Initiative. Can you talk a little bit about like what it actually looks like? So the people that are listening today that, if they're interested in applying or knowing more or planning out the next 6 months, because this begins in January, and I think registration closes in the next 30 days. Kristen, maybe you can let us know in the chat what that deadline is. But they come to campus in January, get to know everybody. There's a little bit of the kumbaya and love and work, and then they go off and continue doing that on their own, but also with the cohort virtually, and then wrap it all up in June.
In June, at the end of June. So it's a 6-month program, and in a kind of big picture sense, the first part of the program is, as Bonnie was talking about earlier, a chance to figure out what our priorities are, what matters most to us at this juncture in life. And so many of us have been so busy through the middle years, we haven't had a minute to think about that. And truth is that we change over time. The second is to think about what the world needs, and to be exposed to a whole set of issues that are affecting our world today and the future. And the third part is to figure out how to apply those insights and to make a successful transition. So for example, in the last third of the program, we'll explore the anatomy of a transition. What are the phases of a transition? We'll look at where some of the transition opportunities are. What are the vehicles out there that can help us get from what's last to what's next? What are the skills that are needed to make a successful transition? How has our story changed? And then what's the support that we're going to need to successfully navigate this passage? Because the truth that you watch the financial services ad, and one day somebody's a banker, and the next day they open a B&B, and the birds sing and the clouds part, and nobody ever breaks a sweat. But in fact, it can be a bumpy path that may take a few years. Again, think of young people navigating their way. And so we'll spend a lot of time on that aspect of the transition. But let me even give you a little more flavor, because I think our hope throughout the program is to bring the best of Yale and the best outside of Yale. So in the opening 3 days on campus, you'll hear from, if you're a fellow, from people like Becca Levy, who was just talking about, also from this remarkable group at the Yale Divinity School who have a project called Life Worth Living. You'll hear from Yale alums like Eric Liu, who wrote a book, You're More Powerful Than You Think, and who is an expert on citizen action. There'll be spiritual dimensions, there'll be research from scholars, there'll be keys to how to move forward. And then in the first section of the program, in the longevity part of that section, we'll hear from Laura Carstensen, who runs the Stanford Center on longevity and has written the book A Long Bright Future, from Andrew Scott from London Business School, who is the author of The 100-Year Life. We'll hear from experts in connection, in purpose, in generativity. So there'll be an opportunity to be stimulated, but always in a way that's practical and pragmatic, and that combines, as I was saying earlier, the best of Yale and the best outside of Yale.
And the space to bring the best of you to the thinking and to the doing, which is exciting. Marc called out an elephant in the room around, what happens, or many of us are facing, a business environment or other environments that seem to not value the wisdom that we have at this stage of our careers and in our lives. And I think that's why the intergenerational piece of this is so interesting, because I have 4 kids, and like you, Marc, I have some newly minted college students, and I see how terrified they are at that stage too, because they're seeing the lack of loyalty from their parents' experiences or others that they see already in the workplace. And there's a lot of fear there about how do they navigate a world that perhaps stereotypes them. So I think there's while there's such different circumstances and situations, we're navigating very similar fears in terms of what is right for me as I move forward in a world that is rapidly shifting. And how do I find or create the environment, even if it's not a change the world grand scale, but in my local community or in a micro. I love the micro entrepreneurship that is happening, where we're thinking in smaller containers. How do we affect deeply and richly fewer people, but in a way that is imprinted for life? So lots of big questions to answer. Marc,
Bonnie, I want to pick up on that, because I think you've gotten to one of the indelible features of the program as we're designing it. So, I talked earlier about longevity. We hear, half the children born since 2000 are going to see their 100th birthday. We hear a lot about the aging of society. The most important demographic feature of the 21st century is age diversity. We have the same number of people alive at every age from 0 to 74. That's never happened before. And a quarter of the population's under 20 and a quarter of the population is over 60. We need to learn how to work effectively across generational lines. And we need to do that in part because we can't be as effective unless we do that. Arthur Brooks at Harvard has written a book called From Strength to Strength. And in it, he argues that young people have fluid intelligence and older people have crystallized intelligence, which is a kind of pattern recognition that you can only get from having been around long enough to recognize patterns. And he argues, and I think correctly, that no workplace, no social impact project, no community should be without the combination of those two strengths. So at every juncture in the Eli program, there will be opportunities to work with young leaders who have this desire to cross generational lines.
I thought Sally did it for me earlier. I had the goosebumps with jubilation, and now Sergio added something about, I think that rather than going into a transition, what this stage of life allows us is to recapture, to the extent that is possible, a sense of enchantment we have lost along the way. And I love that. This is why I love sessions like this. It's just like we all learn as we go. I mean, Rich, thank you for sharing that board game discovery experience, because I have not seen that. And now it's always after every one of these conversations, I'm writing things down and go off in a rabbit hole. So thank you for that sharing. But I feel like even in a session like this, this models the possibility of this inaugural cohort. I mean, look at in 45 minutes what's achieved in the chat, and you can only imagine that over 6 months with people who are signing up with clear desire and intention. You know, that's really inspiring, and to me.
I'm curious, given that we just have 15 minutes left, what questions people have about the program, because this is the moment. You got Marc, right here. What do you need to know for yourself or someone in your life who you think this might be ripe for? What do you need to know?
So, Marc, the first question is, what kind of degree does the program require?
No degree whatsoever. We're totally agnostic to that, but we are looking for people who have been leaders in their earlier chapters in life and who have a desire to have an impact in the world. Maybe that's in their community, maybe it's in the broader society. But we're particularly interested in people who are interested in building on their experience. I think we hear too much about reinventing yourself in this period of life. Suddenly somebody's going to flip a switch and you're going to be an entirely new person. And I like Sergio's idea of recapturing that sense of enchantment. I think what there'll be an opportunity to do through the program is to reintegrate the different lessons of life in a way that provides that sense of enchantment, excitement, joy that is possible in this new chapter.
Mm-hmm. I think in the research up front, I mean, really the conversations were focused on people who were either close or in that end career transition, and they were all people who were leaders of what organization they were part of, whether it was a nonprofit, a big corporation, a startup. They were all people who were, the boss, at the top, making things happen.
Scott's asking how many participants in this first cohort that we're hoping for or getting?
25 is the number that we're hoping for. And I really want to underscore, we're hoping to provide an experience for people which will help them get clarity about what they want to do, where they want to do it, and how to get there. But we'll also be co-creating the program in reality with this inaugural group of fellows, and we're excited about that. Some of these plans, will get reshaped as we go through the program. So we're particularly looking for people who want to help create a new chapter of education that could improve the lives of many other people and be something that gets reproduced in other institutions as well.
Yeah, it's a legacy project of sorts. I mean, Marc, you've talked a little bit about this inaugural cohort as pioneers. Is it? I think, is it because it's a new space of education, of discovery? I mean, I'm trying to remember that conversation. I remember.
Yes. Well, I'm looking at Annie's response. She says the prerequisites are curiosity and wisdom. And, one of the things that I think we're hoping to combine is the wisdom of the young and the curiosity of the old. And that's why we'll have people like Scott Shigioka, the author of Seek, teaching in the program. I'll go back. I invoked Joseph Campbell and the latter before. Joseph Campbell's mentor was Carl Jung, and in 1929, Jung wrote an essay called "The Stages of Life," and he said that you can't live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. If you try to do that, things are not going to go well. And he asked a question. He said, where are schools for people in their 50s and 60s in the second half of life? And it's almost a century later, and we're trying to create this, what my friend Chip Conley calls a midlife wisdom school. But it might, to go to Annie's comment, it might just as much be a midlife curiosity school to help people navigate this incredibly important chapter in life.
And if people are familiar with Chip Conley, I mean, he's been a great contributor to the advisory as well. And we think we were lucky to have him in the mix as the
So
founder of
lucky to
Modern
have
Elder.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the experience and what he's gathered along with Marc, you know, the resources and the people. I think this, you know, I'm in this transition moment myself, and it's been wobbly going from kind of expert back into a student or a beginner's mindset, yet it's so exhilarating. There's something so freeing about not feeling a performative pressure or, you know, to have answers, but to really sit with and allow questions to stir, and trusting and sensing my own knowing, my own intuition for what those answers could be. And I think that this is what this program is offering up, of 6 months of that kind of spaciousness that you're going to dedicate to yourself.
And in the company of other people who are at the very same juncture.
Yeah.
John is asking, what is success for you, for the participants, for Yale?
I think, you know, it's going to depend. Some people will come to Eli with a pretty clear idea of what they want to do afterwards, and will be looking to refine those plans. Other people will have been totally preoccupied with what came beforehand and are looking to help get greater clarity. Wherever people start, I think by the end of the Eli program, I think that they'll leave with confidence about where they want to go, important connections and tools to get there, and a cohort and community of people who can support them all along the way. We're not saying that in 6 months, you know, you can. I think I started that David Brooks review in the Washington Post with the song "Amazing Grace." You know, once I was lost and now I'm found. I don't think 6 months necessarily provides that, but I think people will leave with that sense of confidence, community, and direction that could define this whole period in life.
I think that's a nice. Oh, go ahead, Bonnie.
Oh, I was just noticing in the QA that the Q&A, there's a very very important question. What are the costs of this program? And I think I just want to say I was astounded and delighted, because I've looked into programs, you know, that have maybe similar aims, but designed very differently, you know, that were really out of it, just in a ballpark that is really hard for a lot of people. Marc, do you want to talk about why kind of the tuition costs are also dramatically different?
Yes, well, the costs for the program are $25,000 for the 6-month program, which, as you say, is quite a bit less expensive than some of the peer programs, which are in the $80,000 range. Plus, you need to relocate to another part of the country, and which. But I realize that's not an insignificant amount, but we believe that it can be a transformative experience for people that could shape really the upcoming decades of their life.
I think one of the things that the cost, there is an opportunity for scholarship and support for people who are interested in that. We don't want that to be a barrier. So if you have been a leader and you are interested, you know, have the curiosity and ambition that you'd like to dedicate to this time, please don't let the cost get in the way of application.
Absolutely.
So let's see, anything. Oh, Susan wants to know if we have any, you know, kind of what are the end deliverables, or what's the return on investment here? We've been talking about that. are there older individuals you can cite who would be exemplars for your participants? I mean, I
We've
think,
got some of those, right?
I love that. I mean, I think, Susan, one of them is really that it's that mindset. What's the best that can happen? It's the jubilation. It's the finding the enchantment. It's not any one person. I mean, I think in my mind, there, a few of the people that I spoke to were, they shifted my mindset, and they really kind of shined a light on the possibility of this time. And I always call those people varsity. It's like when you were younger, if you were an athlete and you looked up to the for me, I looked up to the varsity girls, and it's a similar feeling here. But I think it's mostly a mindset. It's that flipping the thing of that feeling of having been decommissioned to really embracing the possibility of the moment. And I think that's the exemplar for me, the aspirational part.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I'm so convinced about the possibilities of this time in life. I had the chance to start something called the Purpose Prize, which is for people who are creating something new to solve the leading problems of the world after the age of 60. And we ran it for 10 years. And at the end of the 10 years, we had 10,000 nominations of people who had done, what used to be the leftover years, the work that defined their life. And I've seen so many people go through some of the existing opportunities for education in this period of life who've ended up on the in entirely new roles, which provide deep fulfillment. A friend of mine had been a senior partner at a law firm. He ended up running the Milken Institute. Another person went from being in the world of finance to going to divinity school, who's becoming a pastor in this period. So the paths are so varied. But I think that this kind of investment in oneself and in getting this clarity could pay dividends for quite a long period of time, and not
Yeah.
just dividends for ourselves, but for the world.
Yeah. Marc, one of the more practical questions that's coming up in the that I'm not sure that how you just ended will answer Susan's questions. Susan is focused on, like, really what is the concrete production expectation here. And my sense is that it's it's relative to each individual. It's a little bit different than the business school model or the corporate model that maybe people are coming out of, and it's more deeply personal. Um, I don't want to speak for the entire program and both of you, but that's how I would answer that question. There's also a question from Anoop, because I don't want to run out of time, is how much time should people expect to commit to this?
Well, the beginning and the end of the program will be 3 days on the Yale campus, and then an average of 5 to 7 hours a week in the 20 weeks in between those in-person sessions. And every person, partly Susan, in response to your question to what Lauren was just saying, every person will do a project where they interrogate probably 20 people in an area that they're interested in and hone a potential role for themselves. So they'll be running through the entire curriculum will be this opportunity to define what work you want to do next.
Yeah, and getting real, I think, there's so many different situations in what I've heard of, the participants who have already signed up. But there is a shared sense of they are at the brink of a transformation moment. And they really want to define that, whether it's a corporate executive leader who is ready to step out and do something, apply. I think you talked about build on what they've already done and also extend and apply to a surprising or unexpected new space, but also athletes who are looking at who am I now that my body is in a certain place, but my mind is, in a different space, and where do I go from there? And people who have run their own businesses, founded companies, yet looking for, okay, how do I not hustle so hard where I have to give it all to this one strain of my existence, but I still want to give and serve just in a much more harmonized way that accounts for all the parts of my life that matter.
What a great way to end. And
Yeah.
I think the mantra for us is purpose in action, whatever form that takes.
Mm. Well, thank you both. I've loved talking with you, and thank you to everybody who showed up today. I've loved the questions and conversation in the chat, and I'm hoping that we can hold on to that and share it back with all of you, so you can go back and go down your own rabbit holes. For more information and signing up, head to the Yale School of Management Executive Education website, which hopefully I don't have a link to share with you here, but maybe Kristen will pop that in there,
There
and
it
or
is.
already has. And yeah, thank you. Please, if you have more questions, keep them coming, and we hope to see some of you in January.
Thanks so much, Lauren.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Marc.
Bye.
And
Thank you, Bonnie.
Kristen.